Most people wait until something's wrong to see a doctor. You are not most people. I'm Kevin White. After more than 20 years as an emergency physician, I realized the best medicine is not waiting for the crash. It's helping people stay on the road. This is The Daily Apple, a podcast about living better, longer. Every episode gives you something you can use this week, a smarter habit, a clearer path, or maybe just a new way to think about your health. Because engaged patients are the best patients, and your best years do not have to be behind you. Let's get into it. Okay, hey everyone, welcome back. I am here with the almighty Tim Organ. I'm so stoked about this time. But on today's episode, we're going to dive into just how some real mega players are holding up the health insurance market and have the health industry in a tight grip. And I don't know, if you don't want to get ticked off, you probably shouldn't listen to this today. I knew about this stuff, and then I heard Tim give a talk at a recent conference. It just came again to the forefront of my mind, and I just, felt my blood kind of boiling a bit. And it's just interesting to hear how the world works. And he's got a really deep insight on how that is and the trajectory of his career in life and how it's changed. Really, really cool story. So I really appreciate you being here, Tim. Yeah. Thanks for making time.
Happy to be here, Kevin. Thank you so much for the invitation. Looking forward to this podcast.
Yeah. You've seen firsthand how giant consolidations kind of shape the landscape and kind of take ownership of everything. So I'm really excited to hear your story. And introduce yourself or tell us what we need to know about you and we'll roll with it.
So my name is Tim Organ. I am right now currently the CEO of a company called Health Business Growth Collective. We are a company that helps health business owners grow and scale their businesses. And we work primarily with doctors who are in the functional medicine space, the integrative medicine, longevity, name it. If you're a health business owner and you're looking for direction, this is the place to be because, we know what's going on in the system right now. And maybe a lot don't. I think a lot of folks, just like me, many, many years ago, and I look back on the history of my career. It was 33 years in the big healthcare sales. I worked for 7 companies. And, coming out of college, I looked at healthcare as really a great opportunity because, here we have a baby boom generation that was aging. And the idea of providing healthcare for this generation as they got older, it was really exciting to me. And also, just love the clinical aspect of things. And very early in my life, I'm like, hey, maybe I should be a doctor. And it just didn't, come to fruition. But I always loved being in the space. I always loved working with, doctors and really diving into the clinical side of it. And I was all in on this. And as we know, as the years went on, there were some consolidations that happened, not only in the big healthcare system, but also in the pharma world and the pharmacy benefit manager world, which we can dive into later on that. But there was some challenges that I started to see and the seam started to split. As I started to see as more consolidations happened, as more tightening of the rules, as the idea of a PPO quickly became a managed care plan, things just started to disappear, even though they called it the same thing. So it's been quite a journey, and we can certainly get into it. Kevin, I know I could probably talk for 30 minutes here without stopping, but I do want to just talk with you on this one to kind of guide the audience because there's a lot of information here, but I'll try to hit it as best I can when it comes to the pharmacies, the pharmacy benefit managers, the healthcare systems, what happened with the Affordability Care Act, which is also known as Obamacare, and how the physician consolidations happened, how the independent hospital consolidations happened, big pharma. We can talk about what's going on in the food, and there's so many different angles to approach here. But I think where my specialty is really leaning into the pharmacies, the pharmacy benefit managers, the healthcare system, and really how those things all came together under one umbrella and how it's sponsored by big government, which is the most unfortunate thing.
Yeah. And you were seeing all this from the inside. What was your role at that time?
So primarily I was in radiology for many years and worked with a lot of doctors in that space. But as you know, radiologists are pretty much, hunkered down in basements or they're, somewhere around the world reading images. So they weren't the ones that were really affected by this. But when I got into basically the pharma space with a company called SureScripts, which nobody knows about SureScripts unless you're inside the world of that world. But SureScripts knows everything about everybody. So if you have a pharmacy benefit, meaning that you've got an insurance card that basically says, here's your copay for a particular brand drug or a generic drug, they know about you. And this network is massive. It does more transactions per year than American Express does. And it's a great network, in many respects. It helps, the basically the distribution of medications or controlled substances on a network, to pharmacies. It provides medication history. It has a national record locator service involved, so you can find your health record if you're connected with a health information exchange or a direct connect. So there's many things that this company did that was great. But some of the things I started to see as time went on, as we got into the let's just say the late 2018, 2019. I started to see some things that I wasn't very comfortable with. Like I would go to a national sales meeting and here we are celebrating new prescriptions. And I'm scratching my head thinking, why are we celebrating new prescriptions? Why are we celebrating that we're distributing more toxic pills to these individuals? And I don't know if you know this or not, but the average American over 65 is on 4 medications or more. And that's what we would refer to as basically pill stacking. But 20% of that population is on 10 or more. So as a doctor, you know that when you prescribe something, there's going to be some things that go wrong and you're going to have to prescribe something else to mask that. And I started seeing this corruption. I also started to see the corruption that was inside of the pharmacy benefit manager world. So not a lot of people know what a pharmacy benefit manager is. Yeah, please, I'm sorry.
A lot of people don't know about what pharmacy benefit managers are. Yeah. I mean, not to interrupt you, but I like how you presented 4 pillars really to kind of simplify it, because people get lost in all the details of this world, but myself included, but it's maybe that way by design, but you got pharma, healthcare, you got the PBMs, and you got government. But yeah, go ahead and talk about that.
So the pharmacy benefit managers were originally set up it's funny how you look at new industries that are developed, and when they start, most of them are starting with a very honest, hey, listen, we want to help. We want to provide some reductions in things, whether it's cost, whether it's management. So the pharmacy benefit managers were set up in the 60s to really handle the aggregation for health plans and for companies, right? So companies were saying, hey, listen, I've got 500 employees. I got 1,000 employees. Why am I paying a cost for medication when, I've got 500 in my population or 1,000 in my population versus 1, right? So the pharmacy benefit managers stepped in and they basically started aggregating lives. They would reach out to big corporations and say, hey, listen, we can handle your prescription benefit for your team because we're working with other companies. We've got, say, 1 million lives in our pool, right? So we're going to go out to the drug manufacturers and we're going to make sure that you get the best price as an employer. And we may even negotiate a rebate so that you're going to be able to share in this rebate, right? So very wholesome back in the day, but for the most part, they were put in place to really drive costs down and make healthcare more affordable. But what we started to see is this consolidation in the industry, especially right around the 2018 timeframe, where you've got a number of big insurance players out there that are dominating the market. And I talk about what I refer to as the 80-20, right? The 80-20 is this: 80% of these pharmacy benefit managers are, 3 companies, and this is CVS, which has an arm, a PBM arm called CVS Caremark. You have OptumRx, which is owned by United Healthcare, and you have Express Scripts. These 3 PBMs make up 80% of the pharmacy benefit management market. If you add, I think, in another 3 or 4 more, they have about 95% of the total. Now, what's interesting about this, as I mentioned, that there's health insurance companies in place. So you have, again, on the PBMs, you have CVS, you have Express Scripts, and you have United Healthcare. United Healthcare owns OptumRx, which is a PBM. CVS bought a company called Aetna, which is a health insurance company. And Cigna bought a company called Express Scripts, which is a PBM. So when you put those 2 things together, they make up 40% of the health insurance market and controlling the majority of these pharmacy benefits. So what we're now seeing is this whole idea of transparency, which has disappeared. That was the whole intention of the pharmacy benefit managers, was to make things transparent to employers and to health plans. Basically say, listen, you sign us up, we'll let you know exactly how much you're paying, right? And how much potential rebate you would receive. Now all that's gone. Like they don't know, a company doesn't know exactly how often they're going to see what their drug costs are going to be, but they may see a rebate come, say 14 months later, which is crazy, right? When you take money and you distribute it 14 months later, I don't know. That seems a little odd to me, but I would say that the worst offender in this whole thing and you look at the line, right? You have CVS Health owning a health insurance company called Aetna. What does CVS also do? They're a pharmacy.
They're a pharmacy, right? Retail, all the... Right.
So now they control the entire vertical, right? They control the entire pipeline of this. And also what a lot of folks don't understand about the pharmacy benefit managers is that it's no longer about providing the lowest cost drug for the patient. What it's all about is providing the highest cost drug for the patient, because what the pharmacy benefit managers are doing is they're going and negotiating rebates with the pharmaceutical company. So let's just take a drug that costs $1,000, right? Now, for the patient, the cost is going to be $1,000. They're going to get billed that. But the PBM is going to step in the middle of this, and they will negotiate a rebate. And by the way, there's a thing called a formulary. Formularies are the drugs that are approved to be able to be prescribed, right? Formularies are put together by the PBMs, not based on, the lowest cost drug or the efficacy of the drug, but how much money they're making in the rebate itself, right? So if you take that $1,000 drug and the PBM has negotiated, let's say, a price from the pharmaceutical manufacturer for $400, meaning that they're going to buy that for $400, guess what the PBM gets? The $600 spread, right? And guess who's paying the $1,000? The patient, right? And this has gone on for years. And you talk about what's driving the healthcare costs right now. Well, of course, the big topic of the day right now is insurance costs, right? Why are insurance costs going way up? Well, the health insurance companies are out of control, and you start to see these types of complications that are being introduced around the cost of pharmaceutical drugs, when that $1,000 drug could probably be replaced by a generic that's $60. Mm-hmm. So this is where this starts to happen. And the CVS example is the physician goes to the electronic health record, they order the medication based on the formulary that was set up by the CVS pharmacy benefit manager. They basically route that prescription to a CVS Health. That CVS Health then will provide that prescription to the patient. And that is a vertical integration, and nobody knows who's making what except the PBMs are making a ton of money in this. And the burden is now put upon the patient because the doctor wasn't able to order, a known generic that is not on formulary, because there's no money in the game for the PBM to put basically a non-rebate drug in the formulary.
How many of these PBM manager companies are there? I mean, is there one per, you talked about CVS and all these different conglomerates. Does everybody have their own PBM associated with them?
No. There's a number of independents, but they're getting squeezed out, right? Just like anything, as the markets consolidate, as the big players start to go in and talk to these health plans, talk to their employers about the rebates. The rebates are a crazy thing, because not only does the PBM get the rebate, but they're also negotiating with companies, large organizations, basically say, listen, you sign up with us, you're going to get a big rebate check, right? So the more they prescribe, right, the higher the prices, the bigger rebates. And guess who's celebrating? The HR manager, right? The company's celebrating because now they're seeing that they're getting all this money from the health insurance company to offset the higher costs now associated with health insurance. But they don't see it as, hey, how can we drive down cost natively? They see it as, how can we reduce our costs based on increasing costs by getting bigger rebates? So these companies who are bigger, like the CVSs, the Optums, and the Express Scripts of the world, are able to go in and negotiate these bigger rebate deals with the bigger companies to provide them more money, right? So you start to see how this thing starts to consolidate, and the less opportunities for these smaller companies, they're done. What's crazy about this is you go over to Europe, Germany, like Switzerland, wherever you are, guess who's not in the middle? There's no PBM in the middle of this, right? And also, there's really no health insurance as well in the middle of this, but that's a whole different conversation that we could go down. But right now it's like you have a middleman that shouldn't be there anymore. And if you're familiar with the crypto world, right, and you're familiar with the banking, the SWIFT system, and how there's so many middlemen in place, and how long it takes for money to be distributed, and how money can just basically sit in the middle, so to speak, versus it actually being put back in the hands of the individual who basically was supposed to be paid. We're starting to see now with cryptocurrency industry, with the blockchain, how these middlemen are going to be cut out. But the unfortunate thing here is, how are we going to get the PBMs out of the middle when now they're involved with big health insurance companies? This is a massive problem that we have in the world. And let me just say one more thing, which is the most corrupt thing, which is so unfortunate, is that in 2025, we will see approximately about 6 billion prescriptions filled in the US alone. 6 billion prescriptions filled in the US alone. That's wrong in my estimation. And we're also hearing, right, we've heard that Trump and the administration basically cut a $70 billion deal with Pfizer, right, to lower prescription drug prices. Now, listen, I'm all in for negotiating and reducing prices, but when you're going to make a toxic substance less expensive, guess what's going to happen? Demand's going to go up, right? And you're going to start to see more. So all we're doing is lowering costs to basically make prescriptions more available, which we're going to have a whole different discussion on this one, because I am not a believer of prescriptions being used as a symptoms-based treatment. I'm more in the world of the root cause plan here, and about leveraging basically natural remedies, supplements, different modalities, really working with doctors who want to get into the root cause, not treat a symptom with a pill.
Yeah. So many directions to go here. The thing that's interesting to me is, it's just so messy. And PBMs, why they even exist, and they're embedded with the insurance companies and all that, just kind of pocketing a lot of money. But
well, I think what happened, Kevin, is that they started to see the writing on the wall, right? Yeah. And what better way to shield yourself by, putting yourself inside of a health insurance world, right? It just, because you can't take the health insurances out, right? Because you need them, whether it's for catastrophic care, whether it's for full family care, whatever it is, you can't really remove the health insurance unless the government's going to come in and say everything's covered. Nobody has to worry about anything, right? Well, we see Medicare, we see Medicaid. Quite honestly, we see the failure of what happened with the ACA, the Affordability Care Act. Like, there's, government in the most part needs to step out of the way, and we have to let, basically, the population to basically say, listen, this is the direction we want to go. And government's role in this is not to feed the insurance companies or the pharmaceutical companies. Government's role is to basically say, hey, we're in a real free market, and we're going to make health insurance available to all who want to participate in any form of healthcare, whether it's, going and finding a functional medicine doctor, whether it's going to a longevity clinic, whether it's investing like we have with HSAs and FSAs, right, those health savings accounts, to be able to co-invest in technologies like saunas and red lights and PEMF and other modalities that can help reduce inflammation, that can really help in the longevity space, and be able to help them go find healthier food, be able to invest in sustainable agriculture, and to start to work with ranchers to start to produce grass-fed beef. There's so many things the government can do rather than paying pharmaceutical industries and health insurance industries. Like, they can go pay for things that are really, and that's when we start to look at a $4.5 trillion healthcare expenditure. There's a lot of money there to be distributed that's being gobbled up right now by the bigs, right?
What I want to get into too, Tim, is that you kind of broke out of the matrix in this whole thing. You were in this nasty world that we just described there. You were kind of embedded in that. And then, of course, you and JJ Virgin got connected. And there was a point, I think she was like, what the hell are you doing, man? What's going on? And that's just a cool little transition. And you finally kind of broke out of that, which doesn't happen very much because, the income is great there. I mean, you're making a lot of money. And all
golden handcuffs, they call it, right? The golden handcuffs.
Golden handcuffs, you bet. Yeah. But kind of take me through that, how that felt like for you and what was going on.
Yeah, it was a really interesting transition. I didn't want to leave the company for a number of years, and then I started to see what was happening. And And I almost looked at it as, hey, this is an opportunity for me to really learn about the challenges that these doctors and these hospitals, like let's just talk about the doctors, right? The challenges the doctors were facing when they were put up against, these regulations that were passed by the ACA. And I'll read this right here for the audience. So basically, the Affordability Care Act required physician practices to adopt electronic health records, right? Participate in quality reporting, adjust to new payment models, expand access to preventative service, and comply with non-discrimination protections. All right. They threw a ton at these physicians who were managing great businesses, and they were really invested in their patients, and they couldn't survive. In order for them to receive Medicare dollars, they had to get aligned with these requirements. And many of them just, they had their assistant for 40 years or 30 years, right? Like working the front desk and managing paper charts, which I know is antiquated, but at the end of the day, this was basically a big splash of water that they couldn't stay afloat, and they had to sell their practices. So I saw this happening, and I was talking to these doctors now that my eyes started to open up to see the challenges they were facing and what was being put to them. I also saw the corruption, the consolidation in the industry on the PBM and the health insurance side. And I became more and more, I guess, disgusted by what was going on, because on the other side of it, I started to see these real healers, these functional medicine doctors, the integrative medicine doctors, the longevity docs, the hormone docs, you name it. These doctors were being challenged, especially during the era of the pandemic. And they were told they couldn't say certain things and do certain things. And we know that a lot of that was very false, and they were accused of doing things they really weren't doing. But they survived. Like, you want to talk about their hero's journey. Like, this was one that was frankly incredible. And I think you've been out for about 10 years now. I'm sure you experienced some of these things as well, about what you can and can't say, and what you can prescribe and what you can't prescribe. But I started leaning into this community because, it was my community. And being in the world for 6 years while I was invested in this community really allowed me to really see both sides of it, and to be able to make a logical decision as to which side I was going to go be a part of. And a turn of events happened. And I'm like, okay, I'm all in on this side, and it's time for me to expose what's happening in the world, in this big world of healthcare, and really look at these. How can I help uplift these doctors? And that's what we do at the Health Business Growth Collective, is that we want them to succeed. We want them to make money, because, and by the way, I'm unapologetic for our doctors making money. And, you hear it a lot, right? A lot of folks are like, yeah, they're just making money and they're running too many tests and they won't take insurance. Well, you know what? At the end of the day, we all need to invest in our own health. And we can't be managed by an insurance card with a prescription benefit. That is not the way that we want to live our lives, right? We don't want to live, in this toxic world. So I started to see that these real healers were really reversing disease. They were getting to the root cause, and it just made me even more excited to really lean into this community. And even more, I've started a new podcast I call Rebels with a Root Cause, that is really going to start to tease these stories out, to talk to these doctors who exited the system or got hit upside the head by a 2x4, during the pandemic, and who came out of it and who are stronger and more resilient because of it, because their methods work. And they know that, the sickest of the sick come to them. The sickest of the sick from the healthcare system are coming to them for their help, because they know that every time they go back to the doctor in the system, all they're going to do is treat the symptom with another pill. All they're going to do is, recommend another vaccine. And this is not the direction that these patients want to go. And more folks are waking up now to the fact that there are alternatives. And I like to say, in a new initiative I'm starting, is called the New Health Paradigm. And this is really an alliance of companies and doctors and other industry thought leaders who can really set up an area for these patients, these individuals in our country and even in the world, to say, where can I find health, that I can find a real doctor? And I'm not saying that the doctors in the system aren't real doctors, but the unfortunate thing is that they're practicing a medicine that is not theirs. They're practicing some medicine that is, healthcare system derived, pharmaceutical system derived. It's crazy to think that a doctor will go through med school and get 150 hours of pharmacology, but they'll only get 15 hours of supplements or 10 hours of diet and 5 hours of exercise, right? They're not being taught to eat the right things, sleep, and exercise. Like those are the foundations of health, right? Right. How simple. You know who Brian Johnson is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Brian Johnson is a tech billionaire, I believe, that basically is on a mission to live to like forever, right? And he's very regimented in what he does. And he spends millions of dollars a year on his own longevity and trying to crack the code. And guess what he found out? It all comes down to diet, exercise, and sleep, right? Millions of dollars later, he's like, oh yeah, this is all I need to do. So you don't need to go through all the crazy stuff, right?
Right.
But it's also important to make sure that you're visiting a doctor who's going to run through a complete panel of labs. They're going to test everything, and if there's challenges you're facing, they're going to get into it with you. They're going to spend time with you. They're not going to spend the standard 5 to 7 minutes that a system doctor is going to spend. And again, these doctors are trapped, right? A lot of them are just they're just not awake. But a lot of them are awake. They're like, how do I get out of here, right? So this is where we step in. We want to help them make this transition out of that world and into the world of real healing and doing it through an integrative, functional way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. You know, what I tell patients that come to us is where they were at before, they're stuck. You're right. They have to see people within 5 minutes. It just works that way. It's the way it's all set up. It's not that they don't care or taking care of their people as best they can, but they're just stuck, which kind of sucks. But all this happened. You make this jump. You break out of the matrix. You totally change the game. You leave stuff behind, and you jump off the cliff. And then some of your own stuff. We talked offline a little bit about what you did and what happened for you personally. And I guess, tell me a little bit about that again.
So 10 years ago, almost to the day, October 1st, I met a woman by the name of JJ Virgin. And JJ is a fitness Hall of Famer. She's a New York Times bestselling author of 4 books. Her most successful one to date is called The Virgin Diet. She's the one who started the company that I'm CEO of 14 years ago. And she is she's a big influencer in the world of health, not only on the professional side, but on the consumer side. And it's just an amazing being. When I first met her, all I thought that she had was a diet book, right? And then she started to tell me about this thing. Now, remember, like 10 years ago, I was in the system. For me, an alternative doctor was a chiropractor, right? I was so bought into the system and so bought into, these prescriptions being the best thing in the world. And, and I started to uncover this and I'm like, oh, what just happened to me? I'm starting to question things right now. And as that time went on, I started to look at myself personally and saying, okay, what am I doing? I've always have been athletic. I was an athlete growing up. I was an athlete in college, continue at 61 years old. I continue to be on the beach playing beach volleyball with folks that are half my age. So I'm always pushing the limits. I'm in the gym probably 5 to 6 days a week. But the challenge is that I wasn't seeing any improvements. And I realized that maybe in my younger years, before I met JJ, I would have gone to the doctor, the traditional doctor, and said, what am I doing? Like, how can you help me? And they'd probably prescribe me a couple medications to take to really start to, improve some of the challenges I was facing in my own health. But meeting her, I got introduced to the functional medicine doctors who really said, listen, we can take care of this. Come on in. Let's have a discussion. So I met with a functional medicine doctor for the first time in my life. And this was about 6 years ago. But what it really came to fruition is that I didn't see any improvements in my body composition. Working out all this time, doing volleyball, like all those things, I wasn't seeing any improvements. Finally went back to the same functional medicine doctor. I said, hey, what's going on? And they're like, let's test your testosterone levels. Great. Well, my testosterone levels were extremely low. So what did they do? They prescribed some testosterone for me. And at the same time, I looked at my own lifestyle, right? The diet. What was I eating? And I was eating healthy. I was eating organic. I think that's the sneaky little thing. Like if you're eating organic, you're eating gluten-free, you're eating sugar-free, all those calories are basically free, right? Well, it turns out they're not, right? Like the first thing I did that JJ basically said is like, you need to track your food. I said, great, I will track my food. Actually, she asked me 6 times, and I'm like, I'm not doing that until finally, finally we went to a area that does a DEXA scan, and this is a body composition scanner. I basically sat on it, it scanned me, and guess what it said? It said I had 25% body fat. And she looked at me and she goes, "You're a skinny fat." Yeah. Because I was 176 pounds, but I was carrying around 25% of my body composition was skinny fat. Now, here's a woman that is basically, 12% body fat, and she's been 12% body fat for literally like probably your entire life. So I got shamed, and I'm like, okay, game on. Like I'm going to do this. So I started tracking my food and realized that I was consuming a lot of fat. I love nuts, right? I love those gluten-free chips that you could dip in hummus like in the afternoon. I was always let's 3:00, my blood sugar would start to crash. I'm like, 4:00, let's get into this. Yeah. And I was eating things I should not have been eating. What was also interesting is that I realized I wasn't consuming enough protein. And we know that protein is very satiating. We know that a good healthy diet has some good healthy proteins, some good healthy fats, whether it's avocados and the like, maybe a little bit of nuts. But for the most part, I realized that I need to increase my protein uptake. So the recommendation from her was do a gram of ideal body weight. And I'm like, okay, well, my ideal body weight is my ideal body weight. I'm, great at 176 to 180. So I started consuming about 176 to 180 grams. And guess what happened? Like things started to shift. I was no longer getting those sensations to have those chips or those nuts in the afternoon, not to put things in my mouth that I shouldn't be doing, because I was eating enough protein that was making me satiated. I wasn't hungry anymore. And I was also, with the testosterone increase, with the protein gains, I started to see increases in the gym, like literally 30 to 40% heavier weights that I could lift. In a matter of about a year, believe it or not, my body fat went from 25% to 18% to 14% to 10%. I lost 27 pounds of fat and gained 24 pounds of muscle. Mm-hmm. Now, I did this all in my late 50s. And I continue this day to keep that weight on, keep that body composition. And it just goes to show you that it's not that hard to make these transitions, whether you're plant-based, whether you want to consume the meat or the proteins. Just make sure that you have a really good regimen of protein to good healthy fats. Like you want to make protein the biggest portion of your plate, right? And listen, I used to love pasta. I used to love pizza. I don't eat it anymore. I look at that as just junk food, right? It's empty calories with a lot of carbohydrates that converts, to fat basically. And you carry that around, and I no longer want to carry that around. So
there's a lot.
I'm so happy to be in the world I am right now.
Yeah. You're extremely lean and fit. I've seen it, but you're absolutely right. As we get older, protein turnover happens much more rapidly. We need to refuel that, and a lot of people don't. There's sarcopenia is a big problem, and if you want to live long, you want to avoid muscle wasting. Absolutely. So I'm glad JJ had that effect on you, man.
Yeah. Well, she's got a new book coming out, in June of 26 called The Metabolism Fix. This is her big book. Like this is the one that really, basically you touched on sarcopenia. Like, the older population right now, the sarcopenia that's going on right now is off the charts. Yeah. And, she's 62 and she looks amazing. And she is really leaning into, you got to build more muscle. And it gets harder, of course, when you're, at the age of 30, I think you start to lose 1% of your muscle mass, right? And now with the introduction of GLP-1s, that's things are just muscle's just falling off the body now. And it's very sad to see, but at the end of the day, you as an individual needs to look at your own body composition and say, I need to basically put, as JJ says, put on more, I need to have metabolic spanks, right? This is when you have muscle, it is a sugar sponge, it absorbs all those things and water and all that. It's it becomes your foundation. And if you're not building muscle, then you're going to become weak. Your bones are going to become brittle. You fall. This is why when you see the elderly population that when they break their hip, what is it? They're dead within a year. Yeah.
Hazard ratio is up. They're more likely to be dead within a year.
Just what would happen if you put on some muscle, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Lean muscle is kind of a resilience, builder. It's money in the bank is what I call it. So if we have another pandemic or anything else like that happens, if you've got a lean muscle structure, that gives you some cushion to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
But it all comes down to, your body is not a bank account. This is one of JJ's quotes. It's not a bank account, it's a chemistry lab, right? So you think about, all the things that you put into it, like you've got to continue to work with this thing, right? Because it has to function correctly. And by the way, that's where functional medicine comes from, right? It's like your body functions in a certain way, and you need to make sure that you're eating right, you're exercising, you're getting those sleep, because all those things work in combination. And the most important part of this is your gut. Right? If you've got leaky gut, you're going to experience inflammation. Like you've got to, and that was one of the things I had, by the way, is I had a leaky gut and I had to remove all the gluten. I had to remove all the soy, all the dairy. And I basically did JJ's elimination diet and started to introduce these things again and found out I couldn't do gluten. Like it just made my gut permeable. And, I was feeling it. As soon as I eliminated it and tried to reintroduce it, I was feeling it. So make sure that you've got a very strong gut, that your microbiome is solid, that you're putting the right things into your body. Because when you have a healthy gut, guess what happens? Like your body starts to transform because things start to work properly. They start to function properly.
Yeah. And you just alluded to it, the elimination diet. Somebody can do that for free. It's not like they even do that on their own. If anybody's listening and they haven't done it, I recommend it. So what are you doing now? What's on the horizon for you? We've talked about where you've come, all this stuff that pisses us off about the healthcare industry. What's your motive? What's your passion moving forward?
Yeah, my passion is to make the world aware of what's going on in this industry of big healthcare and what's going on with the pharmacies, to really start to draw out the corrupt individuals and the corrupt organizations that are a part of this. And that's why I'm so passionate about this new podcast that I'm starting. It's really a brand. It's really a brand around being an advocate for individuals who are looking to, learn about, what functional medicine is really about, what root cause medicine is really about. That's my huge passion, right? And leaning into this new health paradigm with this alliance of really bringing together the best of the best in this world. And I don't call it alternative medicine. This is new health. Like this is what this is about. Because when you look at the old alternative medicine, not a lot of people really know where history of this starts, but do some research on this. You look at herbs, you look at Chinese medicine, you look at energy medicine. There's a lot of things out there that we've been practicing for thousands of years that basically got whisked away by Rockefeller and petroleum-based pharmaceuticals. That really happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and we also saw the patenting of these natural supplements or these natural byproducts into prescription medications, right? So this is where we started to go sideways, and I want to call this out. The other thing I'm passionate about is really exposing the corruption in CVS and in Walgreens and the big pharmacies, right? Where we now saw that Rite Aid is pretty much out of the business altogether. And guess who they sold pretty much all of their remaining sites to? CVS Health, right? If you've ever walked into a CVS Health, I get confused. I walk in and I'm like, am I in a 7-Eleven here? Because I see alcohol, I see chips, I see candy, I see toxic products, and then I see a toxic place in the back that distributes toxic pills. I'm like, this is wrong. Like people are going in there and buying toxic food and they're getting their prescriptions filled. Like they're walking out. It's not. And by the way, it's the corporation is called CVS Health, right? Where in health does this really land? I don't know. I don't see it. But my mission is, I think I'm just going to throw a rough number out there. I think CVS is in 9,000 locations in the U.S. I'm sure Walgreens is probably in the same record, but let's just say Walgreens is like 6,000, right? I've got 15,000 pharmacies that I'm not stopping until those pharmacies are all converted to health and wellness centers, right? That those brick and mortars now become, like when you walk in those doors, you're walking in for true healing. You can get natural supplements and products. You can maybe get into a sauna or get into hyperbaric chamber or any one of these. Like you're starting to see these longevity clinics starting to pop up. But the most exciting thing about this is like, let's turn this toxic pharmacy into a compound pharmacy where we can start to compound peptides. We can start to compound these things that the body needs rather than these prescriptions that are messing up the body's function and messing up the gut. So that's my mission, Kevin. I'm not stopping until every one of those CVSs and Walgreens is converted or shut down completely, right? Like, let's just bulldoze that thing.
That's absolutely right. You walk in and it is like a 7-Eleven. I was just in one the other day. I had to pick up something. I was looking around, and you don't think about that. All this has happened so slow. Nobody realizes it.
Yeah.
It's just all right under our nose.
I mean, the skincare products in there, which are, it's like all that's junk. And of course, then they have the CVS Minute Clinic, right? Which is just hey, by the way, here's your prescription. Go to that counter right over there and get this thing filled. It's all ready for you. CVS did take out cigarettes. Thank you. Like, okay, great. Why did you stop? Right? Why do you have the alcohol in there still? And then I hear this, I've heard these other podcasts. It's like, well, the pharmacies are really being squeezed out. Well, no, they're not. Who's being squeezed out in the pharmacy space are the independent pharmacies, right? They're the ones that are not getting the prescriptions. They're the ones that are dying on the vine. It's the CVSs of the world that are capturing the majority of the market. And then they're in there peddling all this other toxic stuff. When you go into independent pharmacies, they're not doing that. It's like they're basically distributing for the most part, and many of them are compound pharmacies. And, that's a whole different conversation, but we need to change the world of pharmacy from top to bottom in this country. Yeah.
Well, dude, I love the way you think, Tim. I like where you're going, and I'm excited to see about what you're doing next. What else? Any other points you want to leave us with before we sign off, or any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think the most important point here is that you can listen and listen and listen, and you can agree and agree and agree.
Sure.
But until real change happens, you have to take action, right? We all have to take action. And I've raised my hand to take action. And I realize that I'm going to get a lot of arrows shot at me. I'm going to be told I'm a complete whack job and I don't know what I'm talking about and it's not backed by science. At the end of the day, I really don't care. Like, I'm going to speak my truth. And because I know I'm hearing the stories, I see what's happening. And these practitioners, these doctors like yourself and others, you're taking risks to basically be out there, to have a target put on you and say, hey, listen, what you're telling people is not true. And that's not the case, right? If you're on the practitioner side, just continue to lean into what your beliefs are and what you stand for. And if you're a consumer that is looking to say, hey, listen, I really need to look at an alternative here to what I've traditionally been going to my standard doctor who really has made me more sick than healthy. Like, maybe it is time for me to take action and go find a functional medicine doctor that can help me with the challenges that I'm facing in my own health. And, at the end of the day, we have to invest in our own health, right? That is a standard. That's a must, because we can't continue to be paying higher insurance premiums and making ourselves more sick, right? That's the traditional sick care system that's been put in place. And unfortunately, it's going to cost more money. And I understand that there can be some challenges there, but it doesn't take a whole lot to start with some of the very basic things, right? Just movement. Yeah. That's making sure you're putting the right things into your body and making sure you're carving enough time for sleep. And if you have a TV in your room, remove it. Like, that's not good for sleep, right? If you're watching TV before you go to bed, stop it. Don't bring out your phone before you go to bed. You have to start looking at simple things and saying, if I can get a good solid 7 to 8 hours sleep, like how much better I feel, how much your body changes. Those are the things that, you need to really invest in. So at the end of the day, Kevin, it's really about taking action.
Yeah, exactly. Taking ownership of your own health. Don't wait for government to do it because they will eventually. And it's not pretty, but yeah, just taking ownership for it and the drastic changes you can make. But, and all this is backed by science. Everything you did, supplementing testosterone in the right way, all that, lowers all-cause mortality. It's there. So, yeah. Well, again, man, so how do people find you? You talked about the podcast. Explain that again, where everyone can.
Yeah, if you're interested in leaning in and listening to the Rebels with a Root Cause podcast, we're launching this in early November 2025, and this will be available on Spotify and on Apple. If you're a practitioner looking to, really grow and scale your business, you can find us at thehbgc.com. So that's of course, Health Business Growth Collective, hbgc.com. And you can learn about, the events that we throw, the programs that we have, the mastermind that we run, and really the community that we have. And that's what I'm really most passionate about, is this community. Like, I want to bring in as many doctors as possible to make them available to the world, right? And it's our job to help these doctors grow and scale their business, because the bigger they are, the more known they are, the more folks are going to really be, helped by their care and by their guidance. And, the more doctors we can put out there that can be found, the better it's going to be for the health and wellness of this population.
Yeah. Well, Tim, you're doing great work. I love the way you think, and I appreciate getting to know you this past year. So yeah, thanks for everything. And I can't say enough about the Health Business Growth Collective that you just discussed. I really recommend people checking that out. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and everyone have a great day. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kevin.